All right. Are you ready for a new round of COVID?
And lockdowns.
A new variant.
Let's go.
All right.
I saw somebody say something in the chat that was funny. They call it the midterm variant.
The
midterm variant.
Right. We need to lock you down because, early voting has started, right? So you need to stay home. You need to vote, right? You need to throw your support behind the Democrats, I guess. That's the whole plan behind this thing.
Well, the Biden administration has extended the state of emergency for another 90 days, which is interesting because we're going to talk about whether or not you need an emergency to declare an emergency, because there is a new COVID variant and it's said to be resistant to immunity and more contagious and resistant to COVID treatments that physicians are currently using. So here we go. The variant is called XBB. That's one of them. It's a variant of Omicron. It's the BA1.1 variant. There's also BQ1.1. One is spreading through Asia, the other through Europe and the U.S. They say already in the United States, it's concentrated in the New York, New Jersey area, but it will, of course, spread south and west. What we're being warned about at this time is, and the media is also warning us, that because vaccine adoption is so sluggish, they say, not just the first primary vaccine, but all boosters. In fact, about 10% of the United States has accepted the new booster. So they're saying that this is especially scary because vaccine adoption is sluggish. So wait, vaccine has slowed, and then all of a sudden we have a scary new variant that is resistant to the treatments that we're using and previous vaccinations. So, well,
and immunity, you said.
Yes. I mean,
does that mean natural?
There's no data about that, but like we've talked about many times, there's really no data on this bivalent booster at all. So, it's reasonable to say this is interesting timing and also interesting rhetoric that it doesn't respond to treatment. So if you were to say, well, I'm not going to get a booster because, there's treatments available now. They're saying, oh, no, doesn't respond to that treatment. Do we know that yet? We're not really sure. We don't have any numbers.
Who needs data in a time like this? Who needs science in a time like this? So we don't even know. Right. But now we're being told that we need to go into this additional 90-day emergency phase because of it. But we don't know. Well, we responded with a lot of these reactionary measures in the past, right?
Right. And so they had already said this about Omicron. This is the fastest spreading, but now they're not saying it's more that it increases risk of hospitalizations or it's more of a harsher strain. They're just saying it's spreading faster and seems to have some resistance to the antibody treatments that are used in the hospital. So, okay, what of this vaccine? Because every time you get a story like this, they're like, well, then hurry up and get more vaccines. Well, the vaccine being offered now is for the BA4, BA5 variants. And we're being told that the current booster, this bivalent variant, should also protect against this new XBB variant. But how do they know that, given that the current bivalent vaccine was not tested on humans, and this is a brand new variant? So what they're saying is probably it should cover this new one too. What we're talking about is the 8-mouse special. The one that
eight mice. Yeah.
8-mouse special goes along with a side of bugs.
They only tested it on 8 mice.
Yes, this vaccine was only ever tested on 8 mice, period. And so I want to show you this article from the Daily Beast today because it's interesting. They say the bad news, that's the bad news, is super spread, right, super contagious. The good news is that the new bivalent vaccine boosters from Pfizer and Moderna seem to work just fine against XBB, even though the original vaccines are less effective against XBB. They won't prevent all infections and reinfections, but they should significantly reduce the chance of severe infection, potentially leading to hospitalization or death. And then this quote, even with immune evasive variants, vaccine protection against what matters most, severe disease, remains intact. Now, note the supporting quote here from this person, Adalja. That is Amesh Adalja, a public health expert at Johns Hopkins. He didn't say that this vaccine will work against XBB. He says he thinks vaccines in general are important.
Oh, it's the Daily Beast fudging stuff. Amazing that the Daily Beast.
Right. But this is the flavor that you're getting from all media reports against XBB is like, go get that vaccine. Well, wait, because it's for BA4, BA5, and that's not what this strain is.
But just get it.
That's
Don't
okay,
even ask.
go get it, right?
Well, we heard.
We know it's going to. So it's the reporter that's putting quotes in there, and the reporter saying the vaccine will work against XBB, and no other place in this story does he source the fact that this vaccine will, in fact, do anything with XBB.
Well, remember Rachel Walensky, if that is her name, the head of the CDC?
Yeah.
She said a few weeks ago, and we played it here on the show, when asked that very question by Dana Bash on CNN about these different variants, will these boosters help these variants that are out there now and could potentially be different than the boosters? And she said, you know what? Our policy now at the CDC is just go get the shot. Just go get it.
Right.
So that's how we've
stop
simplified.
Asking questions about data.
Yeah. Stop asking any questions. Just go and get it. Don't even think twice about it. It's what they're telling people.
Well, it's worth remembering that the newest booster was authorized only for emergency use. The original COVID vaccine was authorized only for emergency use. So that begs the question, should we not have an emergency to go along with emergency authorization? So I downloaded this today from the CDC. It shows you which areas have high levels of community spread. Does this look like an emergency to you, David, Philip?
No, not at all.
So wait a minute. Let me just get this right. In Billings, Montana, if you happen to be in Billings, Montana, or what is that, Galveston, Texas? Like, those are like the two spots you've got to kind of be worried about? Like Billings, Montana.
Is that all farmland?
Right.
So if you're in those areas.
Spreads by fire smoke.
Yeah. I don't know. This is what they're calling an emergency. Even though pretty much, I would say 99% of the United States is in low transmissibility areas. It's worth remembering that, again, these are mRNA vaccines, and the FDA has never authorized an mRNA vaccine before the COVID vaccine. So the only mRNA vaccine that is currently in use is only authorized for emergency use. But speaking of mRNA, Big Pharma says it has another one in the works.
Oh, good.
With this same technology. What you're seeing here is these two professors, Ugur Sahin and Özlem Terici from BioNTech. This is the company that partnered with Pfizer for the COVID vaccine. They are a married couple, and they, in fact, were instrumental in making that vaccine. And now they say they could use this technology to make a vaccine that attacks cancer cells the same way it seeks out coronavirus, and that they could do this possibly by 2030, which maybe, Philip, you can ring in on this. This begs the question, what is a vaccine? Because if I know it's like a physiological training program, but if someone already has cancer cells and they take this, wouldn't that be a treatment rather a vaccine? Or would this vaccine be given to everyone to prevent any cells from becoming cancerous? Could we use the word vaccine here?
I mean, I wouldn't. A vaccine is basically like for preparation. And then after you've contracted something, it's a treatment. I don't know but I also don't know. Well, like I haven't read that particular study, so I don't know if applying it would both treat and prevent. I don't know.
Okay,
I'd have to.
But here's the question then. Then do we all have to take it? Do we all have to take a cancer vaccine in the event that we might get cancer with the mRNA technology? This is a big calculation.
Well, don't we already take, I mean, what like the HPV, isn't that a vaccine to prevent cancer?
Yes.
So
it is. Well, yes. It's a
well, is it a vaccine? You're literally taking cells of the vaccine of the virus, right?
Yeah.
And you're putting them in your body so that your body builds up an immunity to it, right?
I don't think this is that kind of inoculation. It's using mRNA to seek out these cells, not to expose your body to something first.
Like there are like missiles going after those cells. Yes.
Yeah.
So that doesn't seem like they could call it. I don't know. It seems strange.
So I guess what bothers me so much about that is whether or not they'd say, we all have to take it. And then they sort of coerce us into this because we've got a cancer emergency. Go ahead, David. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to kind of speak to that emergency authorization. The reason they do that is because they got approval to get it out to the masses, which I would wonder if they do to the cancer one as well, because their FDA is not approved any of these. Like, they are not FDA approved.
Yes,
they
you're right.
only can use them because they're emergency use. So I wonder if they're thinking the same thing there. Like, hey, everybody just needs to take it. And here's a benefit. The fact that it helps with the new variant, it also helps with cancer. So you might as well just go get it. Everybody go get it.
Well, these are two different
with
things. We're talking
with
about
the cancer one. With the cancer one, that's not likely. With the cancer one, that's not likely. One, because cancer doesn't spread, so they wouldn't be trying to stop the spread. But two, they said it should be available like around 2030, which means they plan on doing actual scientific testing to make sure that it works. Which means right now they have evidence. They have evidence that it works, but they want to test it to make sure that it does and it's safe. So actual,
you would hope.
Actual testing.
Yeah,
Imagine that. Imagine that they would actually go back to testing again.
Or, and I'm just going to give you a conspiracy theorist response to that. Or could we say there is a cancer emergency because we do have that? People who delayed cancer treatment during the pandemic are being treated too late. Absolutely, oncologists have said that this has exacerbated cancer. Could they say...
Well, they're not going to wait for those profits. I mean, they're going to want those as soon as possible.
Right.
Right. That's the main problem now. The main hurdle for a lot of these biopharmaceutical companies is the length of time that they have to then go through this testing. So if they can say everything is an emergency, they get emergency use authorization from their governments in the EU and the United States, and they can coerce all sorts of African countries and South American countries, and they can do all of that to push through, and they get immunity in the court, right? They get their contracts written up with immunity.
Yeah.
And they get the profits.
Well, and we also funded everything. Like, we paid for everything. So if they're going to do that till 2030, is the American taxpayer going to pay for that research as well? Probably. And then they get to keep all the profits. We don't get anything back. We just pay for all the research and development.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you saw the same thing with the Alzheimer's medicines from some of these companies. Like, there was such promise with these Alzheimer's. They're going to rush it to market. They're going to push it as quickly as they can. And then that all fell apart.
Right. So my reaction to that is, okay, let's see an mRNA technology vaccine go actually through the proper steps. I will wait for that. Yes, I would like to see that.
So another big question worth asking is the World Health Organization. What were you, maybe one big question about lockdowns, right? When you think about this whole process, what were you thinking when you forced us all into lockdowns? And knowing what we know now, like, how would you have done it? Would you have done it the same way? How would you have done it differently? Some of these world leaders are questioned by that. The fabulous team over at Rebel News managed to get up close and personal with the World Health Organization this weekend. These unelected bureaucrats were all gathering together to discuss, I guess, how they're going to lock us down in the future and discuss policy on lockdowns and everything else. And you have stooges like Dr. Fauci, of course, who went along with the World Health Organization's policies on all of this. So the World Health Organization director, Tedros Ghebreyesus, panicked when he was confronted by Rebel News reporter Tamara Ugolini, who went to actually where they were holding this conference. Good for them, the team at Rebel News, and they confronted him about these lockdowns. Watch this.
Okay,
Mr. Tedros, how are you? How are you,
NCD?
Mr. Tedros? If you could do lockdowns again, would you do them? If you could do lockdowns again, would you support them? I'm sorry, please. Mr. Tedros, if you could do lockdowns again, would you support them?
Oh, look at her lackey. His lackey gets in the way.
You got for unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats heading in there to the WHO conference, the World Health Summit. Tedros was nervously laughing behind his medical...
It's funny how he had his hand around her, like, come along.
Yeah, come on.
cute
We're all
thing.
friends. And she, by the way, they had to raise money even to get into that hotel. So, as independent journalists, the only way they were really able to get there and ask those questions is because they had to register for the event by going to the hotel and actually checking in and paying for like a ridiculously expensive room to be there in order to even ask those questions. And then as soon as she asked those questions about lockdown,
substantive questions.
This is two years of like lockdowns. We ask you these questions and you can't answer them. And literally just you led to the disastrous policies worldwide. And you can't answer this question, then one of his like assistant lackeys just walks up and plays interference for it. Dr. Fauci was asked the same thing this weekend. Sort of by ABC News saying that, I had nothing to do with lockdowns. So this is sort of his rewriting of history. Watch this weekend.
Was it a mistake in so many states and so many localities to see schools closed as long as they were?
I think in some case, I don't want to use the word mistake, John, because if I do, it gets taken out of the context that you're asking me the question on.
Well, did we pay too high a price?
Yeah, I would say that what we should realize and have realized that there will be deleterious collateral consequences when you do something like that. This idea that this virus doesn't afflict children is not so. It does. We've lost close to 1,500 kids so far.
But much less than the older population, obviously.
Oh, of course. Yeah. But you shouldn't discount that it does afflict children, so it isn't without consequences. If you go back, and I ask anybody to go back over the number of times that I've said we've got to do everything we can to keep the schools open, no one plays that clip. They always come back and say Fauci was responsible for closing schools. I had nothing to do.
I mean,
let's get down to the facts.
Oh, really? You want to let's get down to the facts.
Get down to the facts. No, he really doesn't want to get down to no facts.
So he challenged us to go back and look at this. So we did. I seem to recall Dr. Fauci in March of 2020 saying it was necessary to close all of the schools. I remember him saying that. He was slamming Governor Ron DeSantis. I remember that. Do you remember that during the press conference? Here's Politico's coverage of that. Fauci, kids could get infected if Florida schools reopen. We're going to lose kids. He was asked, are people under 25 getting COVID? He said, absolutely they are. We need to close these schools. Here he is slamming Ron DeSantis for wanting to keep the schools open. Watch.
If you have a situation in which you don't have a real good control over an outbreak and you allow children to gather together, they likely will get infected. And if they get infected, the likelihood that they will bring the infection home. So that really is a risk. I don't know the situation at all in any detail, and I'm not specifically speaking about Florida. I'm just speaking generically about what happens when you have infections in the community and you have congregation of people, such as in classrooms, that's a risk.
Is anyone under 25?
Okay.
Well, you know what's crazy too is he was really the only consultant they were using, because there were other people that they had brought in to consult during this, and then they didn't have the same opinion as Fauci, and they were relieved from duty. Mm-hmm. So he was the one that they were consulting this whole entire time. So anything that happened came from him.
Yeah,
that's right. And the people who had alternative voices, who were seeing, people like Dr. Peter McCullough and others who were actively, they were talking to Mark Meadows. They were talking to members of the Trump White House and they were invited to the White House. And as soon as, you had the Biden administration come in as well, they were edged out. They were edged out and told to stay away.
And the media loved running headlines about how every time he said something scary, like if your kids go back, they will get COVID, they will bring it to you, they will spread it to grandma. And they quoted him incessantly. So if he's now, his demeanor here is like, they'll misquote me and say that I never, but they gave him plenty of credit when there were school lockdowns. Fauci said, right? He was in all of the headlines.
And he was so pro-lockdown, of course. He absolutely was. In fact, he recently, remember when he told us all, the reason that we had lockdowns in the first place was simply to frustrate people into getting the vaccine. Remember he told us this?
But lockdown has its consequences. You use lockdowns to get people vaccinated so that when you open up, you won't have a surge of infections.
Think about the backward logic there. Right?
And it doesn't make any sense because we went into lockdown a full 7 months before there was a vaccine.
Right.
There was barely even a talk of a vaccine. I mean, sure, some say that they had it, in the wings, but that was not in the public knowledge. So we locked down not for that reason, at least from that Friday the 13th, where we all did in March of 2020, until that summer.
Right. And just how devastating it was for businesses and families, and just absolutely awful. And we now know it was absolutely the totally wrong move to shove people to, inside of homes and keep them locked down without airflow and all of that, and absolutely made it worse. Of course, we now know. And, again, he says that he didn't think when he says that he told us that lockdowns don't hurt children. Remember this, that they don't hurt children. Listen.
Sometimes when you do draconian things, it has collateral negative consequences. just like when you shut things down, even temporarily, it does have deleterious consequences on the economy, on the school children. You know that.
Oh, you know that.
Did you know that? Because you pretended not to know that at the time.
We got to do it.
We were not told, hey, you're going to stay inside. Your kids will all fall behind in school. You won't get COVID. You cool with that?
Yeah, we had people in our chat. We had a woman who lost her daughter recently because of depression, because of lockdowns, and told us that specifically here on our show. And our heart goes out to you. But so many, that's a reflection of so many families. 11 years old who, I mean, because of depression and because of the psychological effects of these lockdowns and what it's done. And you knew this, and you went ahead with it anyway. By the way, from recommendations from unelected world leaders, I just want to remind you all, unelected world leaders. So when you hear us talk about the World Health Organization, which drove this and drove all of these countries to do it, these unelected bureaucrats, then they won't answer for it.
Well,
They'll just walk away from reporters.
Fauci is not only unelected, he was the highest paid bureaucrat. He was paid more than the president of the United States. Still is.
Yeah.
Still is.
I mean, he's still on until December, isn't he? I think he's...
Yes, I believe so.
So he's still paid by taxpayers. One final question from Jonathan Carl was about masks. And now I love his sort of reflecting on, it's like rewriting history on masks as well. Listen.
Would you take back what you said about masks? Obviously, the guidance changed, but you were very definitive. You said there's absolutely no reason for people to be wearing masks.
Yeah, I mean, sure, if I had to do it over again, of course, I would have analyzed it a little bit better.
Oh, okay. Would have analyzed it a little bit better.
As in, at all? Or, like, what does that mean? Like, analyzed it a little bit better. I'm super curious because, well, how much analyzing did you do?
Right.
What was that science based on at the time? But cool.
That's what I was just going to say. It sounds an awful lot like he was describing science.
He is science.
Maybe next time before we make decisions that affect literally the globe, we'll do some science.
That sounds good. Good plan.
But do you have to do science if you are science? Remember, he said he is science.
Yeah.
So
that means anything he says changes, that's just science changing. So.
Yeah.
I'll just make the argument that I told my younger brother one time, and it was like a lawmaker saying something no more makes what they say a law than a scientist saying something makes it science. It's not science until science has been done.
Yes.
It doesn't matter the scientist saying it. If there's no science being done, it's not science.
Well said.
All right.
That was the voice of science.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I am science.
I am science.